Matrix Submerged again, and believe me, we have got an absolute banger for you this time. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm a little bit nervous about this because joining me on the bank is arguably the most successful commercial match angler in the whole of the country. What he doesn't know about this subject really isn't worth knowing. He's won virtually everything there is. He's got a brilliant surname too. It's Jamie Hughes. Now normally we pick a subject and we get the angler to put that subject into play so we can see how it works. But what on earth can we tell Jamie Hughes? We had a conversation before actually. He says, oh, you're going to make me change the way I fish. And I thought, you know what? No, we need to change the way we think. You need to carry on doing what you're doing. So we're actually just going to let him go. Let's let him fish and let's find out what he does and what makes the man so successful. I've got to say I'm proper looking forward to this. He's on the box. We've met a few times before at various different events. It's always a pleasure spending time with you. What we want to know from this is what makes you so good. What do you do?
Right, as I say, it's about keeping things simple, and I go down two routes, either accuracy and just keeping everything as good as it can be, I suppose, and then there's responding to how the fish are feeding. If you can get those two right on the day, depending on what they want to do, then it's job done.
Fantastic. That's going to be the key thing we're going to look at. Secondly, is there anything that you'd like to know from today?
A couple of things. I want to see bite detection on my rigs and also the spread of my bait. I want to see what my baits do when I feed it, if it's falling at the rate I think, and how it's settling on the bottom, what sort of size area, depending how I feed it.
Right, there you go. That will help absolutely everybody watching this.
Right. So we've come to something a bit weird. So the fishing today is completely irrelevant. We're not actually going to catch any, which that'll be my first blank of the year. So I'm not too happy about that. But joking aside, what we come to is a nice clear carp lake. So it's really clear, so Rob can see what's going on under the water. And the first thing I want to go through, so it'd be a typical match for me, and in the way I start things, if I'm not too sure, is very safe and very negative. So that's where my accuracy comes in, it's exactly how we're going to start. I've chosen a nice little patch here, so we can actually see the bottom. So it's nice and clear. I can see some gravel patches, and I've chosen a nice big gravel patch just for visual purposes so we can see what's going on. Obviously, you're never going to have that luxury on a commercial simply because it's so coloured. But here we can see exactly what's going on. I've got a nice depth of a very familiar sort of depth that we'd fish in most commercials. I'm going to start, it's probably about 4.5 foot, which is going to be perfect for me demonstrating both ways that I do things. So firstly, my accuracy, which it comes down to quite heavy or quite stable rigs with heavy shotting down the bottom end. And the ways that we're going to feed, though, that I feel the way that I feed to keep things as accurately as I can possibly do it. Whether it's right, what I think on the bottom, who knows? We're going to find that out. And then next, we're going to move on to loose feeding, seeing the spread of the bait, trying to match my rigs, that sort of thing. I'm a big believer in when the fish want to feed through the water, my rig's got to work fairly naturally as I can possibly achieve with a rig to put it with my pellets. We can have a proper play with that, see the rate of pellets, different types of pellets, how they fall. And then lastly, we're going to have a play with something else that we'll do a little sneaky video of later. But other than that, no. So I've had a nice little plumb up now, found my spot. I'm going to make some rigs while Rob gets his tanks on, and then hopefully I'm going to have a right little learning day. Right, so we'll say first step, it's accuracy. That's the main thing I want to focus on, just to see how accurate I'm being. So I'm fishing, or I'm sort of fishing exactly how I would if I'm going to start a match. When I don't know how many fish are feeding, I want to be nice and negative, and I want to make the most of any fish that are feeding in my area. So being as accurate as possible, that's everything for me. It gives me better odds of getting a bite. So what I'm going to do first, it's all about my stability rig. I've got a nice heavy rig on. I've got a 4/16 rig on in about, so we've got about 4.5 foot, just over. So I've got very, very heavy shot in. And all I want to see is if I can put my little pile, I'm going to feed some micros to begin with, a nice little ball of micros as I would, and see how accurate I am. I believe that I'm right over the top of my pellets, or very close in most circumstances. Rob's going to prove me right or wrong. We're going to see what's going on. But I just want to talk about the little steps that I do to keep me, or what I believe is accurate as possible, and see if it's achieving what we hope it's achieving. So Rob's just having a little paddle about now. So I'm going to get some bait on. I'm going to put a nice big heavy pellet on. I'm going to put a big 6mm pellet on, just for visibility more than anything. I'd say I'm going to feed some micros. I'm just going to have a play about with different ways of feeding those pellets, or different types of pellets even, just to see what we're achieving on the bottom of them and see what works, or what I believe works best. So say I've got a big 6mm pellet on, just so we can see what's going on. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to feed, so one little ball of pellets. Yeah, a little bit larger than probably what I'd normally feed. So again, it's for visual purposes. So I'm going to sneak that in. And before I put it in, so I've plumbed up my spot. I've got my far bank marker. I've got a tree on the island as my marker. I've whizzed a little bit of tape on my pole, which is very, very important, because normally I like to land on a join, but just the way it is to fish in that spot, I need a bit of tape. So I've got some tape exactly where I'm holding it. And really importantly, this right leg's touching my right leg. That's something that keeps me in the same position all the time, so I know exactly where I'm going to put my bait. So I'm going to forget about my rig for now. And I'm just going to really, really slowly turn that pot over, and I'm going to see that bait going down. Yeah, and that bait's going to go straight down, hopefully, maybe at a slight angle, as long as I put it right in the right place. And now I can position my rig with a little bit of luck right over the same place. And hopefully, if Rob tells us there, I believe I'm right over it.
You can see here the ball of micro pellets falling through the water. The ball begins to break up around 18 inches from the bottom, and the pellets fall individually but in a tight area. You can now see that the pellet hook bait is just coming into the shot, and as his rig straightens, it's pulled straight and settles in the centre of the micro pellets. As we freeze this shot, you'll notice that the pellet is just touching the bottom, exactly as Jamie predicted. We're just minutes into the session, and already I'm blown away with just how frighteningly accurate Jamie is. You'll see the pellet hook bait moving away with a combination of the tow and also the disturbance I'm causing. But what does Jamie think is happening down there?
So the rig's moving about a little bit with the bubbles, but there's nothing we can really do about that. So I'm going to just try and check it. The bubbles make it quite hard to put it where we want it, but I believe that's pretty much over the top of it. So I'd like to lay it in the other way, but so with Rob there, again, it's quite difficult to do that, but I'm going to see how accurate we are. Right, so third go. So I want to see now as well as putting my rig in the right area, we're starting to build up a picture of how that bait's spreading. I mean, I believe I'm putting it as good as I can get it, pretty much in that same area every time. It'll be quite interesting to see how much of a spread that's actually achieving, what my group of pellets, those three little balls, whether they're in the same place or not. So that's bang on now. That's as good as I can get it, that I believe, until it starts pulling through. I'm going to try and hold it back as much as I can, just to create that nice slight curve in my rig, so I can see my floats just on an angle. I believe everything's bang on in the right place now.
As you can see here, Jamie is right. His hook bait is sitting perfectly over his feed, and all three balls have landed in the same place. So far as accuracy is concerned, then this is about as close to perfect presentation as you'll find. You'll also notice that, as Jamie had predicted, his line doesn't go straight up vertically from the bottom, but at a slight angle. To try and give you some perspective on just how accurate the feed is on the bottom, when my hand comes into shot, you'll see I can cover the whole area with the palm of my hand. Now have a glance at your hand and you'll realise just how small that is.
Right, so I want to lay my rig. The reason I'm putting my bait into my right and my float into my left, that's the way the water's moving. Once I've had a cast, it's quite easy to dictate how the water's moving. So what I'm trying to do is create an arc. Yeah, I want my float, because today I think it's a lot more surface movement than it is actually water movement. So I definitely believe that my float is pulling my bait along, or trying to pull my bait along. If it was towing, it'd be the opposite. My bait would be winning. But what I'm trying to do is create a tight arc to my rig at all the time. So my float, my bait, as I look at it, is always just slightly to the right of my float, as I'd imagine it, a slight curve in my rig, and almost pulling it along as it goes. So that it's been the bubbles that Rob's putting up and making it move a little bit unnaturally towards me or whatever. But if it wasn't there, say my rig had just been moving slightly along, and with my back shot, I'd be able to actually hold it in place a little bit better than we are doing. So hopefully what it'll show you is that nice little curve on my rig, which in turn keeps it a really tight point for my float to my bait at all times. So as soon as a fish does touch that, I'll see something on my float. I'll either see it lift a little bit, or I'll see a proper bite. It sort of helps to magnify the bites because I've got such a tight line.
Again, the human fish was right. His hook bait was just moving across the bottom with the tow and also my disturbance. If you imagine the float on the surface is slightly downstream and the rig is in an arc from the float down to the hook bait on the bottom, this is exactly how Jamie said it would be. We've proved the way that Jamie feeds and presents his baits is perfect for accuracy, but what about bite detection?
Right, so we're just going to have a little play and see what sort of movements Rob would make, or what movements need to be made on that float, hook bait, for me to strike at a bite. So I'm happy now that everything's tight. So as soon as I feel something happens, no, I wouldn't strike yet. A little lift then, like I had an indication, but I wouldn't have struck at that. Now I'd strike. Yeah, that was a decent half a bristle coming out. That would be worth going up. But there were definitely a few indications before that Rob was doing something, so it's definitely going to be worthwhile knowing how much he was moving that pellet before I actually had a bite.
If we look at that bite again but slow it down, we'll notice several things. Firstly, the pellet is just touching the bottom with the hook completely exposed and ready to hook any fish that takes the bait. This rig was plumbed up with half the float body sitting proud of the water, which helps compensate for the arc in the line and makes the pellet sit perfectly on the deck. As soon as I touched the pellet, Jamie had said that he'd seen an indication, but not quite enough to strike at. If I was being really critical, I'd say that he could have struck sooner, as he didn't strike at the bite until I fully lifted the bait off the bottom and moved his last shot, which was just out of frame. You can see this more clearly in the second clip and just how much I can lift the bait without moving the bottom shot. For ultimate bite detection, the bottom shot should ideally be a little bit closer to the hook, which would allow for less movement before a bite's detected. What was that like on the bite?
Same again. You had a couple of little indications that I thought about, but I thought, no, I'm not going to strike at them. And then I had a full bristle lift, so we went in on it.
An inch over depth?
Pardon?
Put it an inch over depth now.
Yeah.
And then explain what we're going to do now. Just try the difference with an inch.
Right. So we're going to put on. So I've got my shot there, that's marking to where I plumb up to. Where I plumb up to is middle of my body. So now we're going to give it another inch. Inch and a little bit. I'm going to see what impact that has. Well, so for me, I'm a big believer in it's how you put your rig in. It almost doesn't matter, within reason, how over depth you are. For me, I believe it's how I put my rig in, because I'm laying it in and letting it come in on a tight line all the time. I'd like to think that I see what's going on better as long as I pull it tight. So I hold my rig back there a little bit, so it's a lot more stationary that way, than a bit more depth to it.
When freezing this frame, one thing that's immediately obvious to me is that by going just slightly over depth, his hook bait is further away from his feed. You can clearly see his shotting and a more obvious arc to the rig. I asked Jamie to drop his rig in again to see if this result was consistent, and you can clearly see that it is. Now you can also see how the heavy shot pulled the hook bait down almost at right angles to the rig until it slowly settles in the last few inches.
Again, I'm really happy with that rig, how that's behaving now. Wobbling about a little bit in the air bubbles. That's off my spot, that, but I'm happy to leave it there for a second just because I think Rob's going to move that hook bait. See, I think he just lifts up there, and same again, I'd strike then. So for me, whatever movement he's making, that's the level of positiveness, if you like, that the fish needs to impart on the hook bait for me to actually strike at it. So it's just off the bottom?
Yeah.
Yeah?
An inch off the bottom, so 2 inches down now.
Yeah. Right, so come to me markers. I'm going to move me markers another 1.5 inches. Go in on that. this one should impart the weight of my pellet on my float, shouldn't it? So it may sink my float, this. So this is something I wouldn't do myself. I never fish off bottom, not in this way. Never with a normal rig, just simply because I'll have no stability now, or I believe I'll have no stability, just because my rig's going to move through my peg a lot quicker. Possibly if I'm off bottom. I believe I'm off bottom there. Definitely my float's a lot lower than it was. So there we go. Rob's definitely lifting that every time. I don't think he hasn't pulled it at all yet. He's just lifting the pellets every single time.
As Jamie drops his rig in again with it set an inch off the bottom, you see that in the opposite way to when he was over depth, the bait is right over the feed as it settles. Within seconds though, it's drifted away, and it's only the weed that stops the pellet in the end. Bite detection is magnified though, and as soon as I touch the pellet, Jamie sees movement on the float and strikes.
So he's definitely lifted, but it'd be dead interesting to see how much he's lifting that bait before I'm seeing them indications on the float. Right, well Rob's come out now, stopped to steer me swim, and hopefully we've been through enough things there just to see the accuracy, or hopefully the accuracy of the feed, whether I'm doing it as well as I can. The importance of being right, whether you need to be over depth or even the benefits coming off bottom if that's necessary, and just see how them bites are showing up. So depending how I put my rig in, whether them bites show up as they should, or whether I'm missing out on something should be a lot better. So other than that, I'm quite happy with that. That's what I'd do. If I were to fish short, they're definitely the key points that I need, or I need to be achieving to be as efficient and as accurate as possible for me to get a bite. So we can have a look now what went on and see if I'm if I'm right or if I'm useless at this after all.
Well, the first thing I've got to say is that I'm very impressed with your accuracy.
Thank you.
First point, when you release the cup of pellets,
yeah,
when you release the pot of pellets, did they make it to the bottom intact, or did they break up on the way down?
I'd say pretty much all the way down. There may have been a few stragglers,
yep,
but I think they pretty much got to the bottom. I'd like to think.
You put 3 in, how big do you think the area was?
I reckon 10-inch square. Yeah, I'm going to give it 10-inch square. I'd like to say a bit tighter, but...
It was a little bit bigger than my hand.
Was it?
With
all 3?
Which is about, yeah, with all 3, which is about 10 inches square.
Right, I like that.
Not 12 inches, not 9 inches, 10 inches square. Yeah, the accuracy was absolutely amazing. The other thing that really got me was how accurate you are at plumbing up.
Right.
It was talk about dead depth. The pellet, if that's the base of the pellet was sitting on the deck.
Right, that's it. Quite
like
interesting that though, Rob, because I've plumbed up to the middle of my body in my float.
Yeah.
I've not plumbed up to the top of my bristle, which
Yeah.
would probably suspend it off the bottom.
Yeah.
It's that little bit of slack that you create after you're plumbed up because of the weight.
Yes.
That's probably creating it to be perfect. Middle of your body seems to be spot on.
It's interesting seeing how it behaves on the bottom as well, because obviously when it's coming down in from the side.
Yes.
You're laying it over to the one side. Obviously the shot dropped quicker, the bait follows it, so it drops really quickly.
Yeah.
Until the shot have got to their full depth.
Yes,
and
the
then
last
that
little bit
pulls
comes in.
And it hits the deck just because the right hand side is ever so slightly shallower.
Right.
Over
right.
the pull, which is about 1.5 feet, and I would say it's shallower by about 1 inch maximum.
Yeah.
So basically it sits there on the deck like that, dragging over until it gets onto your spot. And folks, I've never seen anything like it before, but literally the pellet was lying like a barrel on its side.
Was it?
And the hook was off the deck.
Right.
That's how accurate it was.
Yeah, it was spot on. So it's quite difficult today because there's a lot of tow. You've only got a small window in holding it over the spot, and then it seemed to want to go quite quick.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you, because what do you think is happening down there? And you've just nailed it.
Yeah.
The tow is pulling through, and it is pulling through quite quick. Your spot is, like you say, about 10 inches.
Yeah.
Where it was hitting the deck and levelling off was probably just off the one side of it. And what you're actually doing in this weather with this side wind is you're trotting the pellet
through your spot.
Through it really slowly. Here it's a gravel pit, there's the odd little stone on the bottom as well, so every now and again it was getting caught up against a stone, hanging on for a while, but then it would pull over it until it got to the one side, and then it would get caught in the weed, because you've got weed just on the left hand side as you look at it, right hand side as I was looking at it. So just everything about that presentation was absolutely incredible. The other thing that I liked was presentation. You know, it looks good for a start, but when we look at the indication side of things, what do you think was happening there?
In every case, I just felt you were lifting my pellet and interfering with that bottom shot.
Yeah, so one of the key things for me was that because it was so dead depth, as it was moving through the peg, as soon as something touched it, it would have an effect on that shot.
Yeah.
Now, if it was shallower, actually there was potential for more movement because it's
Mhm.
trotting through a little bit quicker. If it was over depth, there was just that little bit more
Was it you could
opportunity
move it
for
an inch,
movement.
say? Yeah.
Oh, not a lot. But the key point is this, and I've seen this before, particularly in the winter as well. One of the key points for really, really good indication when they're very shy or they're not feeding a lot, you know, in the winter. It's all right now, they're going to hang themselves on
Yeah.
a lot of the time. But get that shot as close as you can.
As close as you can,
to
yeah.
that hook link. What's your hook link? 6 inches?
Yes.
Yeah.
In that case, we had 6-inch hook
So
length, yeah.
the closer you can get the bottom shot to the hook, and even like in the winter, I'd be tempted to actually pull that shot onto the hook link rather than having a free hook link.
Yeah,
And even
yeah,
put it down.
I'd actually do that in the winter.
do you?
Definitely, I'd put it on, and other things come into it in the winter as well. And I use much finer floats, just
Yeah, yeah.
more sensitive floats to show things up, just to
Everything
magnify
about
that bite thing.
So, but what I've got to say is, it was faultless, mate.
It's
Absolutely
absolutely-
faultless. You know, 3 cups in. Where the float was landing was quite a long way away from where it was settling.
Right.
I didn't see it exactly. It's hard for me to judge distance, but what, 1.5 foot across the surface? You're laying it in.
Yes, yeah, definitely, at least a foot, yeah, just with how fast it's pulling.
It's like a darts player. That's it. He needs to give up fishing and take up darts if he's that accurate.
Well, unfortunately, that's the end of part 1. But I really hope you've enjoyed seeing the underwater world of Matrix and seeing just how good Jamie is and how much he knows about what's going on underwater. It's absolutely fascinating to be on the bank and seeing him film this, and it's really, really interesting to see what's coming in part 2 as well. We've got Jamie looking at hard pellets, we've got him looking at the rates that different pellets sink, and also we're teaching 1 or 2 things that he didn't quite know. So make sure you sign up to Club Matrix, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and part 2 will be back very, very soon.